Okay, get your reading questions out and get your papers. No. Yes, papers. I'm sorry. My brain is... What do I say? I say that every week, though. I can't be impaired every week. I could be, but... Should Aeneas have left Dido? Oh, that was kind of a rhetorical question as I collect your papers, but that seems to be the consensus. Yes, you have a paper for me. Thank you. Thank you. You guys are heartless. No, I'm neutral. I'm not trying to persuade you one way or the other. Well, we talked about this she goes with, but that is fraught with difficulties as well, I feel like. We are going to, so, we don't meet next week. And so we're going to do another paper just like the one you did. All right. So does everybody feel comfortable if we brainstorm bunches and bunches of ideas on the board together, that you could put an outline together and write a paper like we just did? Does that seem easy enough? Okay. Yes, it's based on the Aeneid again. And so I'm going to ask you to do the whole thing because you have 2 weeks. So I'm going to ask you, we'll do a bunch of ideas together. Don't worry. You will leave here with plenty of ideas to use. And based on yesterday's results, it's going to be heavily weighted towards one side of the question. But you could try to argue the other if you want. And then make an outline just the way we did, choosing 3 supports and then 3 supports for each of your main supports. Does that what I'm saying, it makes sense to everybody? Okay, does it not make sense does anybody feel like it doesn't make sense? We're going to do another paper just like the one we just did. But we're going to talk about consuls and Roman life first. And then we're going to talk about the Aeneid, and then we're going to do the process that we just did with the paper you just gave me again. And so if that was easy enough and straightforward enough, especially when together we got a bunch of ideas, then you'll be fine. But if there's any questions, I don't want you to leave the room today at 10:15, whenever, not knowing how to do it, okay? But first, let's take a look at Rome. Let's get out our reading questions. And so the previous chapter had been called How Rome Ruled Italy. And we talked a lot about wars and expansion. This was called How Rome Ruled Herself. So you read about, well, what was this government like that they set up after they got rid of their kings? We talked about it a little bit already, but when you have a king, you've got to have somebody in charge, right? The main office was consul. What's a consul? This is your first question. And how long could they be in office? Everybody get up your questions. Yes. Okay. That is summarized very well. Kind of like a president, you elect new ones, if we had 2 presidents, every year. Can you imagine if we elected a new president every year? It would be really confusing, wouldn't it? One of them would start a policy and then it would just be undone the next year. Mm-hmm. That would be the toughest thing of all. Absolutely. But after you've had kings, and the kings have kids who assault your wives, and you don't want anyone taking charge that might possibly turn into a king. So we can't have the same person ruling for very long. Can you understand the fear? It seems kind of weird to us because, well, give them a little time, to put ideas in place. They didn't want to give them time. These two consuls, Dorothy Mills tells us, one of them always had the power to veto the action of the other. So you can't get one of them just going off having crazy policies, making crazy decisions, because the other consul will say no. A law was passed making a consul ineligible for re-election for 10 years after he had held office. You don't get to be consul again for 10 years after you've been consul, because we don't want the same person elected over and over and over, because what does that start to sound like? A king, because they just never get out of office. It's not that you lose all power, because we're also informed that once you've been consul, you get to join the Senate. Okay, so now you're a senator, and you are part of the lawmaking process. So does that make you feel better about that? So if you're well liked, you can do things in the Senate too. The consuls had charge of the state treasury. They've got the money. They can do with the money what they want. Judges in all law cases, and commanders in chief of the army. But during the early years of the Republic, Rome was so often at war that the consuls were obliged to be away for long periods. This is the guy who managed this is treasury, and he's the judge, and he also is commander in chief of the army, with all power in the field. If you're a soldier out with the consul as your general, you better do what he says, right? But who's gonna take care of Rome while they're gone? What if they're gone 6 months, 8 months, 10 months out of the year? So they had a lot of lesser offices. Quaestors are the treasury officials. Praetors are the judge, subsidiary judges. Aediles deal with public works, building roads, building buildings, fixing buildings. Because you need all of those to make a society work, right? And if your consuls are gone, no one can do it. And it got to be to the point where these jobs that I just listed they call it the cursus honorum, the course of honors. You get elected. I think Ideal was the lowest. I can't remember, and because they're just basically functionaries that dole out money because the temple needs repair or whatever, or the streets need repair. And you'd work your way up. You ran for one, and then you served in that capacity. You ran for the next one, and you worked your way up to the point where you were hopefully running for consul. I guess we do that. Rarely, I think, do we elect people for public office, big public office, that haven't had a little public office. I suppose Donald Trump is an anomaly in that, right? Because he wasn't a senator. He never had any political office, I don't think, but most of the people that we elect for high officers do. And it was the same way in Rome. So they had an assembly of the people that could get together and vote and present ideas of laws to the Senate. People weren't in charge. Only a certain group of people were in charge. What are these two groups of people in Rome, and who kept struggling with each other? Yeah, tell me one. Oh, are you just? Did you want to do it? Oh, okay, Matthew. Patricians and the plebeians, and why are they arguing all the time? Yes, that's exactly right. The patricians were in charge. All the senators were patricians, because all the consuls were patricians. In fact, the plebeians couldn't even hold those offices. They couldn't even run. And so you have to, I don't know which way is more humiliating, the way it was or the way we think of it. We tend to think of upper class and lower class in terms of money. Do you know, like upper class people have more money and they're wealthy, and the lower class people are poorer? It wasn't like that. The patricians are the families that go back to the beginning of the Rome. They're the founding families. They're the nobility. So think like medieval nobility. I've got a coat of arms. I've got papers to show that my ancestors have always been in the nobility. I personally might not be very wealthy anymore. Maybe my ancestors squandered our fortune, but I'm still nobility, right? And then you could have somebody who's not of a noble background, but they become wealthy because they become a merchant or something like that. And they've got lots of cash, but they're still low class, right? They're still not the nobility, and maybe the nobility looks down on them, even with all their money. Like, you're all flashy and you have a nice car, but your family has always been low class. That's the way it was. It wasn't necessarily a money thing. It was a nobility thing. Okay, I'll do Rhett first.
I think that's like why the Olympic Games now, like back then especially, and like I know that was Greece and stuff. I mean, like the big games and events and stuff, because like those were like the only opportunities to have to start like
Mm.
for like the rest of your family.
Mm-hmm.
And like, because like I was thinking like, as far as they have a lot of money, like to them back then, that wouldn't really start a really class for the rest of the family's life and their family.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think like the games and the tournaments and the Coliseum, the fighting and all that stuff. And I know the Coliseum is used for other stuff too. Like there was like big games and
Mm-hmm.
races.
Mm-hmm.
That everybody wanted an opportunity to start a legacy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that's a really good observation, and I think definitely in Greece, if you won in the Olympic Games, you were golden, and your family is highly respected. Unfortunately for the Romans, almost everybody who engaged in that sort of thing was considered really low class. You couldn't really work your way up through that. It was slaves. Those gladiators were slaves, or all the people in chariot races. And in fact, we're going to hit an Emperor Nero, whom you have probably heard of, who decided he really wanted to compete in chariot races and stuff, and his whole administration was like, oh my gosh, does he not know that anybody who wants to be taken seriously and be respected doesn't do that sort of thing? There were lead pipes. And yes, I've heard this too, that if you absorb a lot of lead, it's not good for your brain. Yes, Nero had other problems definitely than just wanting to be a chariot racer. We'll talk about him later. Yeah, Jesse.
Since they basically have lawyers, I don't really know how this works, but couldn't they just buy the rights to the name? Like the royals did, the royals before, and they were rich. Couldn't use, or could they not?
Apparently not. It was too valued. This was not something you had to have it. You had it or you didn't have it, and you can't get it if you don't have it.
That's one of the things. Like I feel like.
Except just a second, because we're jumping up to something I'm going to talk about in a minute. Because there's gonna be, because you're like, does it stay that way forever? No, it doesn't. There's a way. Yes. Hold on to that question. Hold on to it. Oh, you guys are so good. It's almost like you've been set up, to be my audience and say the right things so that what I say later will make more sense. Okay. The patricians held all the offices. The plebeians held no offices. And we read through some early laws, but they weren't really helpful. They tried to give the people more rights, but they weren't really helpful. The patricians The patricians were the commanders of the armies. The plebeians were the soldiers, right? Everybody, the sloggers, they're digging the trenches and they're building the fortifications and they're sitting out in the rain and doing the hard work and they're getting wounded and killed. Not that patricians didn't get wounded and killed in battle, but the common soldier was a plebeian. Now, picture this. You're a plebeian and you have a small farm and it's enough to keep your family alive. You know, you're never going to be wealthy from it, but you live well enough off your farm. And then Rome goes to war and they say, you're signing up for the army, Mr. Farmer Plebeian, for the next 7 months, we're going to be on campaign, and you leave. What happens to your farm while you're gone? It isn't maintained. You left your wife and your children there, but your children are little, and what is one woman alone going to be able to do on an entire farm? She's not going to be able to take care of that. So you go off and you're wounded. You survive. You're not permanently maimed or anything, but you're wounded in battle and you come back. And your kids are crying and your wife is starving and you're completely broke because you have no crops to sell and you have no food to eat for the next winter. Just imagine that. And nobody's passing any laws to help you. You just went out and you shed your blood for Rome and you came home to devastation. A little bit. They came back to a lot of hate, animosity over the war. But sometimes, you know what? This is every wartime, Jesse. It's just most of us rely on the produce of our farm anymore. But families left alone when the dad or the husband goes off to war. It's rough. It's rough in every time, definitely. So the plebeians started asking questions. What exactly am I fighting for again? I thought that when we took that city that we were besieging all those months, that the loot from that city was going to be passed around to all the soldiers, but it didn't happen. I didn't get anything. I didn't get anything. And then I came home and I have nothing at home. This isn't fair. So I think, can we all sympathize? Put ourselves in that place. So the next war rolls around and the guy sets up his table in the marketplace, says, okay, everybody come up, sign up. You're signing up to, for the next campaign. And the plebeians said, we're not going to do it. We're just flat out not going to do it. We're going to all gather together. And they went up a hillside, the Sacred Mount. And they just set up a camp up there. And they said, basically, we're seceding. We're seceding from your society. We're seceding from Rome. And we're not going to fight. And we are the soldiers. And we're not going to fight. So they sent a guy up. And he told him a story. He said, you know what? Once upon a time, the body, all the parts of the body said to the stomach, we think you're just a slacker. We don't appreciate that you do anything for us. We feed you. The hands say, I feed you. I put mouth so I could chew up food for you. The feet say, I walk around finding food for you. And we give it to you and you just take it and you don't give anything back. And so we're going to stop feeding you. And we can all see where that story would end, right? The body dies. It starves to death. So this guy told him the story and said, you don't understand that the patricians are like the stomach or the brain. You don't see as much what we're doing, but we are planning all the campaigns. We are planning the future of Rome. And you're a part of that. But we have to work together like a body. It's a really good story. And I hope it sounds a little familiar because Paul, in one of his letters, said, the church is the body of Christ. And the hand can't say to the foot, I don't need you. I don't want you. I don't need you. It can't do that. Because we're all important. Even the parts that don't look like they're doing much. I found this out since my toe has been hurt, which it's still not right. My balance is, I can't stand on that foot. Just one banged toe, and my whole body doesn't balance correctly anymore. The whole body is important. It's a wonderful story. And he got them to come down, but not until they had demanded a new office, tribune. The tribunes were going to be plebeians, first plebeian office, and they're going to represent the plebeians. And they are going to be able to veto anything that the consuls or the Senate does that they don't like. That's a lot of power, isn't it? That is amazing that if the Senate does something, passes a law that's not helpful to plebeians, that might endanger their well-being, we veto it. Do you know veto is the Latin word that just means I forbid. I forbid it. So they're the tribunes. So they're on their way, those, getting married, paths to advancement. They have their own office now, tribunes. But they're not there yet. Tribunes. No, they were that's exactly it. We represent the plebeian community, and we will stand between the patricians and the rest of the plebeians and make sure that you do not do anything harmful to them. Okay. And then they said, you know what? The plebeians said, we need to know what the laws are. The laws were not written down anywhere. Patricians just knew what they were. And sometimes they twisted them. Can you see how? Imagine if there were only one group of people in our country who knew the laws. You know what? Sort of, we have so many laws. There is. We call them lawyers, because sometimes the law is so complicated. Just even tax law is so complicated. We have specialists, that help us with our taxes. But imagine if you just didn't know. And the people in authority could really abuse that. And they said, I want there to be a group of people to write down the laws. We need them written down. So they elected 10 guys, and they sat down. They spent a couple of years doing this, and they compiled laws. They called these laws the 12 tables because they actually inscribed them on bronze tablets and put them up in the forum. So everybody could come and see what are the laws. And I actually wrote down some. And Matthias, I'm going to read the first one just for you. Marriage between patricians and plebeians is forbidden. Boom. There goes your path to advancement. We don't want my grandchildren being the grandchildren of those dirty, rotten plebeians. I will not let my daughter marry one of them. Yes. And they let this go through. I don't know that the tribunes, okay, Rhett, ooh, I can't remember the details. Somehow these 10 guys were above being vetoed by the tribunes because they had to be, or they'd be breathing down their neck. The tribunes would be dictating the law. Do you see what I mean? And they didn't want that, so they removed them from the power. I can't remember the details, I'm sorry. But there was a situation where they were not able to veto the laws. Yeah, they actually superseded. For a while, they didn't have consuls. They only had these 10 guys. And then one of them started abusing his power, Appius Claudius. And it was another girl thing. He tried to snatch a girl because she was pretty, And he made it look like she was his slave and he was going to kidnap her. And yeah, he did not end well. He ended up dying in prison. So keep that in mind as you get old. Why are guys? It never ends well. Don't just snatch pretty women. All right. So, okay, other laws of the 12 tables. A deformed child shall be killed. Yeah, I don't like that one.
Kill them guys. What if their eyes are just like 1% apart?
That is not deformed. Women shall have guardians even after they are adults. You like that, Ella? Always have a guardian. Women always have a guardian. You are always under the authority of your dad or your husband. That's who's your guardian. Or a son. No meetings in the city at night. Why? Sounds like a very good way to start a riot. I feel like if you're meeting at night, you don't want people to see you. And if you don't want people to see you, you're probably up to no good. If you're up to no good, you have no business meeting together, right? Yes. So, yes. So that is just a small, obviously 12 tables. I'm just giving you a few of them. So now the plebeians know what the law is. But finally, in 367, now let me look back. When did they get the tribunes? Oh, it doesn't say what year. No. 494. So it wasn't until about 130 years later that they passed a new set of laws. And wait for it, here it comes. Of the two consuls, one must be a plebeian. And what do the consuls get to be part of after they're consuls? And there's their path, right? There it is, Jesse. Finally, after over 100 years of wrangling and fighting over this, they send plebeians in to be consuls. And they automatically become part of the Senate. And then it just gradually, the two come together. It doesn't happen even overnight then. There's still a residual prejudice, right, against people with plebeian background. But now they're in. It gets to the point where they can hold every office. Funny thing was, some of the lesser offices before the consul thing, they opened them to plebeians. Didn't have to be a plebeian, but it could. And as soon as the plebeians won the right to vote for a plebeian, they seemed satisfied, and they didn't. They kept voting patricians in because apparently they thought the patrician was the best choice for the job. And good for them. I feel like a lot of times we vote for people based on the fact that, this is a particular group of people that we want to promote the well-being of, not they're the best person for the job. Does that make sense to you guys? I might vote for this person to be governor because she's a woman. Because I want a woman to be governor, instead of looking at all the candidates saying, who's the best person, no matter if it's man, woman. It doesn't matter. Does that make sense? And so good for the plebeians. It appears they did that. They looked at the candidate pool and they said, well, we like the patricians for this job, but we just like knowing that it could be a plebeian if we wanted it to be. At least they can run.
They were like, yes, we're going to get all the votes from all
Yes.
guys.
Unfortunately, probably so, Rhett. It must have been a real downer for the first plebeian that ran. What? Yes. Yes. It must have been depressing. We have no records of the first person plebeian who lost. Yes, Jesse.
Well, they have a few problems here with the plebeians being
the Senate, I'm not saying that they can't be good candidates and they can't be good consuls, but what I'm saying is it took them 100 years to get to the Senate. That's 100 years of practice of being in the Senate, a politician on the patrician side.
Yeah.
So they have 100 years of experience, and they have the plebeians have no experience.
And that 100 years plus.
all the years before. And this is a very good point. It's scary to let an inexperienced group of people in. However, that plebeian, Jesse, that got elected as consul, all right, didn't just get elected as consul. Remember we said that cursus honorum? They've held various positions, and they've been mixing with the lawmakers because they have now a position. So it's different than if you elected me to the Senate and flew me to Washington, D.C., and I just walked in. I don't know what's going on. I don't even know my way around. I don't know any of these people. I don't know how anything works. It wasn't like that. That would be foolish. And that would be very awkward for the person elected. But I don't think it was so much like that. But you know what? It might have been. Again, no historian has told us, what did the first plebeian in the Senate feel like? Or what did they say? We don't know. But I like the way you're using your imagination to put yourself in the place of the people. That would have been daunting to be the first one going through that process. And you're absolutely right. This is why I think in America we often have families. The Kennedy family is what I'm thinking. So John F. Kennedy, president. His dad had been in the Senate. His brother was in the. Is Ted Kennedy still alive? Just that, I mean, it was a long time ago. I mean, for decades, right? Ted Kennedy was a senator for decades. Robert would have been, had he not been shot. This family had a history of being in government, and so they knew the ins and the outs. And I think sometimes we tend to look at a family like that and we kind of trust them. We trust, how this works. You know how this works. And then sometimes there's a backlash. And I think that's the Donald Trump, an outsider, right? We want somebody who's not steeped in the politics, and that's when it can come in good. Maybe this plebeian comes in, and he's going to clean the swamp. No, I don't know if there's a swamp in the Senate then. But he's going to look at things in a fresh way, and maybe new blood into the Senate. But it's a very good point.
Also, if the plebeians are the ones who are allowed to compete in the Olympics, and now they're also allowed to get a place in the Senate, then that means that the patricians are now at a bad angle because they're only able to be in the Senate, or that's like the only thing they do, that's what they're known for. But now, plebeians come in and take over, then what are the patricians doing?
Yeah,
Well,
their spot.
I suppose every social class sort of feels that way. When another group of people moves in on your turf, so to speak. Do you know what I mean? Like, this was my thing. Maybe that's part of the reason we tend to keep other people out of whatever it is, our clubs or our little enclaves or our political party, because this is my thing. I don't want to share it with you, then it won't be my thing anymore. It's certainly good for Rome, though, to have the voices of people with different backgrounds and different experiences, right? Which is why all citizens can vote here. We get to choose. We want to hear all the voices. It was a long struggle for the plebeians, but, and I'm going to maybe ruin, because we left them, yay, now the plebeians are happy. It's actually going to be several hundred years later. They're still talking about people they called new men, which meant the first person in your family to ever hold office. They still recognize that as a group. Wait a minute. your family's never been elected to anything, and you're coming in and doing this. There was still a pushback on being the first, because somebody's got to be the first, right? And so we're going to talk about a guy named Marius in probably sometime in March, and he took over as consul and broke a lot of laws and killed some people. But people still treated him like, wait a minute, what? You're kind of an upstart, aren't you? Your family is a nobody family. It got to be the point where it doesn't matter if you're patrician or plebeian. It mattered, has your family ever held office before? Are you one of the Kennedys? Are you one of the Fergusons, the non-office holders? Okay. You guys are very interesting. That was an interesting, I will just tell you, this has nothing to do with the class, but I am distantly related to the Roosevelts. Well, I mean, distantly, my great-grandma was a Roosevelt, but yeah, Katie Roosevelt. She died when I was 15. Like, I used to play games with Grandma Katie. And so FDR and Teddy are both distant cousins. FDR is closer than Teddy, but my family's from New York. They came here, farmers. It was over a girl. It's over a girl, again, the girl thing. Two of my relatives were fighting over a girl, and one of them got it and the other one left. And but anyway, my I don't know how many greats, great, maybe 7 or 8, I don't know how many generations. Isaac Roosevelt fought in the Revolutionary War, and he organized George Washington's farewell address at Fraunces Tavern in New York City. Yeah, Isaac Roosevelt. And the funny thing is, I read his history. It's called The History of Us, Joy Hakim's History of Us. And I was reading it to my kids, and Isaac Roosevelt was in it. I'm like, I have papers in my file to show that I'm a direct descendant of Isaac Roosevelt. Anyway, so I do have consuls. I have presidents in my family, but not very close. Yeah, I'd have to be the Roosevelts. I'd have to play up the Roosevelt connection. Okay, we're done with me. What are the 3 classes? We're shifting gears. Let me say we're shifting gears. That was about how Rome ruled herself, ruled Italy, non-Roman cities. But Owen, what did you want to say?
The thing about president in my class last year that we do, there's somebody and they were like really this and we like they bring.
That's cool. Once you get a lot of generations down, there's a lot of people related because the branches branch out, But that would be very cool. I'd be very proud of that.
Oh, yeah, I'm related to that. I suppose that. Oh, let's just keep talking about it.
Okay, no, we are going to do that, right? All right. So Rome, at this point, basically had taken over all of Italy, more or less. All right. Much of Italy was under Roman control. And then you've got to make a decision. Well, what rights are those people that we conquered going to have? And I asked you, there were 3 classes of cities. What are the 3 classes of cities in Italy? Red's looking it up. It's okay. Does anybody else want to tell me what the 3 classes are? Nobody in the class wants to tell me about the classes. All right. First class, full Roman citizenship. Everyone in your city, back there, back table, you, first class, total Roman citizenship. You have all rights in your own city, and you can go to Rome and you can vote as a Roman citizen. You can run for office in Rome. You're awesome. You guys are second class. Sorry. She's going to have to be third class. Apparently, we're going to have to be third. Second class is the Latin right. You have full power in your own city, but you can't come do it in Rome. Don't be coming to Rome and trying to vote or run for office here. You're a Latin, and you can't do that. Then we have third class, which is just you're a colony. you're a colony. You owe everything to Rome, who has sent you out as a colony. She rules you, and there's not much you can do about it. But you don't mind being a colony because you're probably a former soldier. And you put in your time with years of hard work and fighting and maybe getting wounded. And then when you're discharged from the army, they give you land, they give you a house and property in a new up and coming settlement.
You were on the other side, right?
No, no. They would settle their own soldiers there. They would send out a colony. Because they don't live in Rome anymore.
But, I mean, that doesn't seem fair. Like,
Sorry. If you get a time machine, you can lobby for the colonies. That's what you should spend your time doing when you go back. I am sorry. Yes, it just says, let's go straight to the horse's mouth, as they say. Lastly, there were the Roman colonies, military outposts to guard the frontiers and coasts, some of which had the Roman and some the Latin rights. There were also some outlying places in which there was no organized government. All right. So it depended on the colony, apparently, where you were, who lived there, what you were close to, and how important you were. But for many of them, it was just governed by Rome, directly by Rome.
was it like, so like, how many people lived there?
See, this is the second time this question has come up, and I didn't look it up. But I feel like by the time, okay, not maybe this time, but by the time of the early empire, okay, I'm thinking somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million.
Because, like, yeah, that's like,
It's a lot of people.
I was thinking, like, if, like, there was someone, like, obviously, really, really low class, and it's, like, super obvious that you're not any and you could tell, like, if you're just kind of like a middle guy who could, like, because, like you said, it doesn't matter how much money you have, it just matters your background. So, like, if you're gonna just be like, oh, yeah, I'm this of this person, like, can you just play it off like that? It's like, if there wasn't very many people, you could just know.
Yes.
So, like, 500,000 to 1 million, if
No.
you could just, like, pass it off as, like, yeah, I'm a great guy.
I don't know. And maybe it happened.
Maybe I'm just thinking of, like, it today. I mean, I know that
And we're assuming that all the people in the colonies want something they don't have, but maybe they're perfectly content. This is what we think now. It's a good point. So I got to read this quote from Cicero because I loved it. Cicero's writing several hundred years after all these events that we're talking about, but he said, "I will never deny allegiance to my native town. Only I will never forget that Rome is my greater fatherland and that my native town is but a portion of Rome. I have a higher citizenship than my city, and that is my Roman citizenship." Does this remind you of anything in the Bible? I have a higher citizenship. Remember, Paul said, "My citizenship is in heaven." I have a higher citizenship. Cicero was saying this, I don't know, like 50 years before Jesus was born. I'm a citizen of a higher thing than my native town, because Cicero wasn't a native Roman. He was from an Italian town. Yes, except not Cicero, because they killed him. Sorry, not for Cicero, but yes.
Like, we have, like, the Bible and, like, the disciples' testaments of what they saw of Jesus. But, like, there's great, like, Roman philosophers and stuff like Cicero, not Cicero.
Because.
But, like, it's not just, like, during Jesus. It's, like, they had to be writing about Jesus. Do you just not have that?
Okay, we're just going to take time to talk about it, and we'll just kind of browse through the rest, because this is a really good question. So, and it happens to be something I know it's in my head because my high school kids are doing Rome right now, this year. Tacitus is a Roman historian, and he lived about 100 AD. And he's writing about the emperors. He's writing about the time of Jesus. And he is the very first, and what we have, the only pagan historian who mentioned Jesus and Pontius Pilate. But he mentions it. You know, in this time, when Tiberius was emperor, this guy, Jesus, they called him Christ, and he was executed under Pontius Pilate. And then Tacitus says other things about the group of Christians, because he tells the story of Nero burning Rome. We don't have very many. Are you talking about not Christian sources? You're talking about people who aren't Christians writing about Christians.
Like, this is like what they did. Just use this right. And he wrote, he didn't just wrote, but this,
Mm-hmm.
he watched and wrote, and he kept documents.
Mm-hmm.
He just wrote everything he saw. And so this would seem like, for other people, like such a miraculous, like miracle, or kind of what Jesus was known. Like that's what people recognized. They didn't really, I mean, like Christians recognized him for him being the Messiah. Like the other pagan, they didn't care if he was this guy that their religion was expecting to come and whatever. Like they cared like impossible things were happening. And so I feel like there's got to be more than just that one house.
Well,
that people just wrote about. Because like this is like a crazy thing. Like if I just started hearing these insane things, like people just being healed like this, like just like that. Like,
they didn't hear, Rat. They didn't hear, I think, because no one believed it who didn't see it. Okay, you got to remember how fickle people are. The same Israelites who saw the plagues went out in the desert and built a golden calf. What is wrong with you? So my high school kids are reading, this is church history. This is written in the early 300s. It's a history from the beginning of the church. And this week, because it addresses what you're talking about. Okay, this is in the year 117. This is the Emperor Trajan. To him, Quadratus addressed a defense of our faith. And he says this Christian wrote to the emperor, "Our Savior's deeds were always there to see, for they were true. Those who were cured or those who rose from the dead were seen not only when they were cured or raised, but were constantly there to see, not only when the Savior was living among us, but also for some time after his departure. Some of them, in fact, survived right up to our own time." He is saying in the year 100, there are still people healed or brought back to life by Jesus or the apostles, who also did a fair amount of bringing back to life and healing. But he has to say this because nobody's heard about it. Because people outside of Israel, people outside of Judea, thought the Jews were just an obnoxious joke. I hate to say it that way. But they were just annoying and they were always rebelling. In fact, the next book you're going to read, I'm going to tell you about, we're going to kind of shift gears and it's going to be out of chronological sequence, unfortunately, but that's the only way I could fit it in. And it's going to involve the Romans attacking Judea. And so I don't think word got out, Brett. I don't think word got out that these people were coming back to life or that they had been healed. But Quadratus there in 100 says, some of them are still here. Just ask them. They could bear testimony. Can you imagine going up and asking someone, what did that feel like when he healed you? And when you could not walk and then suddenly you could walk, what's that like? And they could talk to them. But it's a really good question. But as far as we know, there are very few mentions of Jesus and miracle really, really early. We have letters in about the same time, like the early 100s, from a provincial governor, and we'll talk about this later, to the emperor saying, what do I do about these Christians? We get information like that, but we don't get the miraculous story. Occasionally, but a much later source will say, oh, and those crazy Christians, some guy they killed and they claim he's alive. That's as far as it goes. There's, I don't know, some guy got executed, but they claim he's alive. I've nothing to say about that. And that's it. How did we get off on this subject? Can we trace our breadcrumbs back? I feel like it was not just out of the blue that you said that, but it had something to do with what we were talking about.
First question was,
We're kind of talking about like the classes, and then we got into like them conquering stuff, and then we got into like Judea stuff.
Okay. It's fine. It doesn't matter so much. I just thought if there was a departure point that we could find our way back to, we would just join the road there. But if we can't find it, we'll just join the road wherever we want. This is my life now. My brain does this constantly. What did you say, Matthias? I am going to roll with it. I'm going to ask you, what is a paterfamilias and what can he do? That's the next question I asked you. Yes, sir. He is the head of the family, the oldest male of the family. It's grandpa, it's dad, it's your older brother, maybe it's you, but it's not you. And it's not me, and it's not you. It's only the guys, because remember, women need guardians. They're adults. And the paterfamilias, it means family father in Latin, has complete and utter power over his family, life and death. He can kill you if he wants, with impunity, the oldest male of your family. And remember, we're not talking about just what we call today a nuclear family, your dad and your mom and the kids. It's the extended family. Okay, so it might be your grandpa. It might be your great-grandpa, although people didn't tend to live as long in the ancient world. No, well, yes, because we're all family now. So the oldest male member of your family has all power over you. Remember when the Horatii fought the Curiatii, and the Horatius brother came and he killed his sister because she was boo-hooing over the dead Curiatius brother, and his dad said, "It's okay," and I would have done it myself. He would have had the power to do that. We see other horrible stories, one of them involving that 12-table law guy, Appius Claudius. He just killed his daughter. He killed his daughter to save her from the clutches of the evil Appius Claudius. And this is not murder, because he has all rights over her. And he did it because he thought he was saving her from a fate worse than death. It's kind of scary. So, if you think your dad is fairly strict, just keep in mind, he's not the paterfamilias. Can I have you executed? If he does, he's going to get in trouble for it. Roman family life was strict. You do your duty. Yeah, but then like today, unless you are kind of off mentally, you're not just going to do that to your own children. You got to remember, fathers then are no different than fathers today. For the most part, they love their children. They do not want to harm their children. And when they do harsh things to their children, they feel like they have a very good reason for doing it, and it's for the greater good. You have to give them the benefit of the doubt that they weren't drunk with power. Oh, I am the paterfamilias and I can kill all of you. The Emperor Caligula is famous for saying, I wish Rome had just one neck so I could just chop it all off. Yeah. Oh, I'm worried about you, Matthew. Okay, one last thing, and then we need to talk about the Aeneid. Dorothy Mills told you a bit about Roman religion, and I just summed it up with one question. Was Roman religion concerned with man's spirit or with his outward duties? What do you say? Definitely outward duties. Dorothy Mills even said they viewed it as a bit of a contract between you and the gods. If I do the right sacrifices and I say the right prayers, the gods owe me. They should come through. And you know what? If I don't, they will punish me. And it's probably legitimate because I didn't keep up my end of the bargain. So I'm trying to think of the equivalent. Something that we consider our civic duty. Okay, voting. We consider it's a duty of a citizen to vote. Okay, what else is the duty of a citizen? Maybe not a duty, but we usually follow the laws. I'm thinking of like 4th of July celebrations. It's not your duty to go to the fireworks, but in general, we look kindly on people who are celebrating the 4th of July. Oh, they're very patriotic. Or, oh, yes, I get annoyed at that. Okay, come back to me. I'm sorry I mentioned fireworks. But that is what Roman religion was like. It's like the things we consider our duty. We vote, we follow the laws, we're good citizens. And so I go to the temple, I offer the sacrifice, I say the prayers, I'm a good person. But they were not looking for salvation. They wouldn't have even thought they had something to be saved from. They were not looking for a spiritual reality beyond us, right? They just wanted to do their duty. Just do your duty. And then remember Aeneas, how he carried the household gods away from them? Do your duty to the household gods. Do your duty to the gods of the city. And you're good. And the early Christians, they referred to them as atheists because they wouldn't do their duty to the gods of the household or the city. They wouldn't make the sacrifices and say the prayers. They don't believe in the gods, which was true. They didn't believe in the gods. So it's completely different for us. We don't see religion. When you say religion, we usually think your heart is involved, your spirit is involved, or you're looking to transcend your sinful nature or whatever. And Romans wouldn't have understood any of that at all. That wouldn't make any sense. You just do your duty to the gods, and then they do their duty to you, and we're fine. Problem is, and this is why they started questioning those stories, like from Homer, and what about when the gods disagree? Which one do you do your duty towards? You're pretty much sunk if you make one of them angry. They will come for you, which is a really good segue into Aeneas and his problems with Juno. Juno's very bad-tempered, but she has a lot to deal with. Her husband is a bum. Over break, I want you to start reading the next chapter. It is chapter 9 of Dorothy Mills, parts 1 and 2. You are going to, we're done with Rome becoming a republic, Rome conquering Italy. We're going to talk about what happens when a relatively close neighbor sees Rome taking over all of Italy and popping into Sicily a little bit. Because remember, I didn't bring my map in, but remember, Italy stretches down and it kicks Sicily, and right on the other side of Sicily, across not very much water, is Carthage. Dido's Carthage. And they like Sicily. Sicily's a wonderful place. I don't want the Romans in Sicily. And these two powers, just like Dido, I looked it up, and your version didn't say this, but before Dido kills herself, she says, "May there be hatred and war between Aeneas's descendants and mine. May we always hate them." Oh yeah. Sad breaks out in various ways. And it's going to happen when these two go to war with each other. 3 wars. They call them the Punic Wars because Punis is the Latin word for Phoenician, and the Carthaginians were Phoenician. So they're the wars against the Phoenician people, the Punic Wars. Read parts 1 and 2. You have 2 weeks to do it, but it's the same amount that I usually would give you for 1 week. Ditto all the other assignment. And while I'm talking about this, let's talk about the new book, and then we can just launch in for the rest of our time. We can talk about the Aeneid. We are going to start a new book. It's another G.A. Hinty book. So if you liked the Cat of Bubastes, yay. And if you didn't love the Cat of Bubastes, it's fine. You learn a lot of history out of these books anyway. It is called For the Temple. And I want you to read the first 5 chapters, the first fourth of the book. And I told you because I had many things I wanted to fit in, it's removed from time. This book is set at a time after Jesus. It is set in the 60s and up to 70 AD, okay? At this point, Rome is an empire. And I think you guys know enough world history probably to know there are Roman emperors, and you already are a Caligula fan, apparently. And so this is after the Republic has turned into an empire. And Rome has many years before this conquered Judea. It is a Roman province. So in the Bible, when Jesus is born, why are they in Bethlehem? Because the Romans ordered everyone to go back to their hometown for a census. Well, how do the Romans get to order people around? Because they run the show now in Judea. They are in charge. Why the Romans get to crucify Jesus? Because the Romans are in charge there, right? So this is in that time period, but you have to picture a time period when, Peter and Paul have been already died for their faith. And so we're getting the late 60s and 70s. And I mentioned earlier that the Roman world saw the Jews as problems. And I think if there had been stories about miracles, they wouldn't have believed what they said. Although it just pops into my head, Rhett, that even after the resurrection, the Roman guards were paid off to just say they stole his body. I mean, the officials, the Jewish officials and the Roman officials were suppressing evidence of miracle even then, right after it happened. And so the Jews tended to rebel more frequently than other places that Rome ruled because they were so offended by the Roman presence, they thought it dishonored God. It dishonored the temple. And so instead of just peacefully minding their own business and living under Roman rule, they kept capturing Roman garrisons and killing the Roman guards, or little things that mushroomed into big things. The Zealots started it out, but eventually there's a very large party of people in Judea who just think we should get rid of the Romans, and they think we can get rid of the Romans. Yes. He preaches another king, not Caesar. Okay, so that puts the book in context for you. We will talk about these events later, but this was the only place that in the year that I could slip this book in. So to make it, that everything else makes sense. Yes.
It just occurred to me, trial, if Jesus got executed in the most gruesome way ever, like after such a past trial, I wonder how many other times that justly or someone has been crucified because they didn't investigate it more, or like all the people up on just died.
Millions of times throughout history. That is the horrible thing I'm going to say to you. Millions of times, I bet. You ever read The Count of Monte Cristo? Or Tale of Two Cities? Don't ruin the story of The Count of Monte Cristo. Yeah, you know what, Jesse? I think that people have been railroaded and quick justice has been served more times than we can count. This now makes me very sad, but it's true. All right, to perk us up after such a downer, we have a poem. And then I need you to get a blank piece of paper out. Okay, Roman roads. Because Dorothy Mills talked about the fact that under the Republic, many more roads were built. There were various highways that exited Rome, depending on the direction in which one wanted to go, much like we have interstates that exit the Quad Cities, whether you're going to Chicago or Peoria or, north to Dubuque. The ancients used to say that all roads lead to Rome. The Romans needed many roads to bring their soldiers home. They marched away to conquer, they dealt in foreign trade. They traveled on vacation, they strutted on parade. To all their distant provinces, those roads ran long and straight. They made the Roman Empire glorious and great. You never think about roads being really important. But if the next town is 10 miles away and all you've got is a dirt path, and every time it rains, it's just a mud hole, you're going to have to walk to that town because your carriage isn't going to go through it. Your car isn't going to go through it. It's very inconvenient. They say that in early America, I don't know what, it was New York to Philadelphia or something like that. It was a 10-day trip because the roads were abysmal. Roman roads were awesome. And they could move troops and supplies faster than you would think. The fact that they're on horses and carrying them in carts, amazingly fast, partly because the roads were so good. All right, get a blank piece of paper. It can be the back of this week's reading questions, just anywhere where you know where they are and you won't lose them, and you have plenty of room to write. I'm just going to move this because I have a feeling I'm going to be walking back and forth. All right, I have a picture to bring around for you guys. We're going to skip around. I'm not going to, you read the story, so you don't need me to retell you the story. I'm just going to skip around to highlights. Aeneas and Turnus have a final showdown at the end of the poem. Turnus is down on the ground, and he's begging for mercy. Not begging exactly, but it was a thing in the Roman world that when you had, and Greek world too, if you had someone down and under your power, it was good form to maybe spare them and give them back to their family if the family paid a ransom. Just like us, if somebody asks you for mercy, it's nice to spare them. You can still humiliate them if you want to later or whatever. Not recommending that course of action. But Aeneas was just on the edge. Like, oh yeah, because that's the kind of guy I am. Why didn't he? Why didn't Aeneas spare Turnus? Why did he just kill him? Yes. Because Turnus killed young Pallas. Pallas, Evander's son. He's a kid, he's a teenager. This is his very first battle. He's doing awesome. And Turnus is older. He's a grown man, full strength. And he sees Pallas. He's like, yeah, I'm coming for you, Pallas. Wait a minute. You're going to go after the kid? You're the big, strong guy, and you're going to go after the kid. Pick on somebody your own size, as they say. But he doesn't. He goes after Pallas. And then, it would take me longer to look these things up. I'm sure you trust me. And sometimes I say things that maybe aren't in this retelling because they're in the poem. He kills him and then gloats over his body. Yeah, you thought you could play with the big boys, but you can't. I'm paraphrasing. Yeah, I'll send him back to his dad. This is how his dad deserves to get him back. And then he sees Pallas is wearing this awesome belt. It's all engraved with gold and silver, and he just snatches it off and takes it. Not that kind of belt. It's not holding up his pants. He doesn't have any pants. And Aeneas looks down and he sees that belt. And the poem says, and he plunges his sword up to the hilt in Turnus. And Turnus's limbs are dissolved in death, and he goes cold. The end. That's totally how the poem ends. I'm not making that up. I should have brought it so that you would believe me. The end. It's very abrupt. This is a painting from the year 1700. Here, is there any way you can just kind of share, like kind of grouply look at it? It is Aeneas and Turnus, the fight with Aeneas and Turnus, 1700. And do you notice all the ghostly looking personages?
Yeah.
I think
There
the-
wasn't actually anybody else there, was there?
No, they were, oh, it wasn't a single combat because the single combat got broken up.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know, it doesn't say. It doesn't say. But I think the ghostly personages are probably gods, but I think one of them might be Juturna. I like this to be Juturna. She looks upset. You know, Juturna is his nymph sister. Turnus's half-sister nymph.
Look at that son of a gun.
What?
Yeah, I can't believe you just killed that little kid. That's
Do you want to see? Here, I'll just slide it over. You can just leave it on the table if you want. Now, Turnus, on the other hand, or Aeneas, on the other hand, I'm sorry, at one point in the battle finds that King Mezentius. Do you remember Mezentius is the jerk king, neighbor of Evander, and Evander said, you know, they hate him so much that they got rid of him and he went off and joined Turnus. Aeneas encountered him. But this is a fair fight. They're both grown men. And Mezentius is wounded and he hobbles off behind a tree to recover. But his son Lausus comes up to Aeneas and says, I'm going to get you. You did that to my dad. Here's how Aeneas responds. Madman, what do you want? To conquer me? Nay, that is too much for your strength. He tells it, but this is what Turnus should have done with Pallas. You're just a kid. I am not going to fight you. You're just a kid. That's not even a fair fight. But he just comes on. Lausus just keeps coming on. Aeneas grew angry, and the time was come when Lausus must die. One blow with his sword did Aeneas give him. It cut the shield in two, but it was, in this case, if somebody's attacking you on a battlefield, you can kill him. Aeneas was sorry, but listen to what he says. Remember what Turnus said over Pallas. Take that, you jerk. You jerk dad Evander can have your body back now. And this is what Aeneas says. Aeneas was sorry to see him lie dead. What can I do for you, noble boy? You had great pleasure in your arms, your weapons. Keep them. I will not take them. Your father also shall have your body to bury as he will. See these guys? They're very different. They're very, very different in the way they treat others on the battlefield, the way they treat those younger. Aeneas isn't there to pillage, but Turnus pillages. Okay, we're going to go back and forth. We're going to add things to the board. We're going to mention stories out of the Aeneid, but I wonder if it's purple. Okay. Here's what I want you to write at the top of your paper. Is Aeneas a good leader? Don't answer yet. Yes. No. Okay. Now, we're going to do something today. You don't have to write these terms down, but there are in the teachers who taught speaking and writing in the ancient world, the study of rhetoric, which is the study of communication, had a system for how to write papers like this and also how to get ideas, because they knew, just like we do, that sometimes you just get stuck and you can't think of ideas. And the more ideas you can think of, the more material you have to craft your speech or your paper. So there were certain places, and they call them topics. Topos means place in Greek. We usually think of a topic as being an area of discussion, but really it's a place. It's a place where we're going to talk about this subject. So the topics were places you went, and there were 5 of them that were common. They're common not because they're not important, but because they're useful for every situation. They have every topic you could, or every subject you could possibly write on they're all common ground. And we're going to talk about a few of those and explore how to ask our minds some questions about this question. Yes.
I was you would like us to complete at the end of the break.
Yes. So you have 2 weeks, and as I said earlier, we're going to brainstorm. We're going to spend the whole rest of our time, like 25 minutes here. We're just going to write down ideas, and we're going to refer to the Aeneid, and we're going to ask ourselves these questions and write down as much as we can. I'm going to give you some ideas of other questions to ask yourself at home to maybe add to it. And then, just like last time, you're going to start by picking 3 big supports, right? Not little tiny ones that are very specific, but 3 that are pretty broad, and then seeing if you can find 3 more specific reasons to back up each one, right? Did anyone have trouble doing that last time? I mean, I looked at everybody's, the ones of you that brought your outline in, they were great. The ones of you who didn't seem to think that you were fine. I am not going anywhere over break. If you start working on this project and you become unsure of what to do, call me or email me. All right, I'll get back to you as soon as I can, okay? All right, but yes, by the end of break, and I want you to do, in case I forget, let's write them down. Simile, alliteration, an ing opener, and our new antithesis, right? Setting 2 unlike things next to each other. While Turnus was vengeful over Pallas, Aeneas was merciful over the body of young Lausus. That's an antithesis. One is vengeful, one is merciful. That's antithesis, all right? Okay, the first thing we have to ask, well, let me see if any of you know. I need some information. I need to ask myself something before I can answer this question. What is a leader and what is good? This is very vague to me. I need to define it. The first common topic is definition. I need to define, what do I mean by good and what do I mean by leader? Okay, let's take leader. What does a leader do? That's not, okay, yeah, I was gonna say, that is just the stupidest question ever asked. Okay, so inspires followers to follow, right? You can't be a leader with no followers, right? Presumably you're in a place of authority because all the rest are behind you. Does Aeneas have people following him? Yeah. And does he seem to be able to inspire them to keep going? Okay. So so if that's our definition of leader, someone who has those following him, in whom he inspires the will to continue to follow him. Would he be a leader under that definition? Does Aeneas do that? Okay. Yes.
I feel like a leader is someone who has like people trust him enough to where he has the power to do wrong things, but he does right things.
Okay. So you know what? Can we just write up here? A leader has. No, this is not.
Because like you think about like a good leader is someone that has the ability to do wrong.
Okay. He has followers. He inspires. And what? Say again. Just no. And he. Because my mind focused on this, and then go back to the very beginning of what you said.
I said a good leader is someone who has the ability, like the power to do a wrong thing. That's the right.
Oh, okay. And okay. Let's bring in the idea good, because now we're edging into good, and that is the 2 things. So a leader, we've defined what a leader is. What are some ways in something that something can be good? What does good mean? Good is very vague. Like I say pizza is good and God is good. That's just wrong. Okay. Say again, Matthias. Helpful? Yeah, I'm not, like, there's not one answer I'm going for. Just, what do you think? Here, I'll jot them down. Helpful. You can write these down or not, but these are just, we're defining. He's helpful. What do I mean that, what do I mean when my child is a good child? What do I mean? Okay, so there's a moral good, right? Good can be moral. You're truthful and you're upright and you're honest and all of those things we associate with being morally good. What else? What do I mean when I say somebody's a good football player? Do I mean they're morally good? Talented. So good at something can mean talented at it. The good pizza doesn't apply. We're not eating people here. Aeneas is not good in that respect. So moral good, talented, well, that's just sort of like the superlative of good. It doesn't give us more information about being good. But the other thing is, we said a good leader. So he's talented at these things, right? He's talented in these things. How about if I say, this is like the football player, but he's a good athlete. I might mean that the person is talented, but what else might I mean? It's another goodness we can have. Strong, physically, a physical strength. Yes, I love it. Strength. Let's do a little strength, and then let's do mental strength, physical strength. Okay.
Because yes. Like, I don't know. In my mind, I'm still kind of debating, if he should actually go.
Well, that's a good thing. Okay.
I thought that was going to be the question.
Oh, should he have killed him? Oh, that's a good question too. Let's start asking. Let's start filling in some things. Okay. So, is Aeneas morally good? He.
I'd say that's relative.
Okay, just a second. What did you say, Matthias? Oh, okay. Oh, that's very philosophical. Which means we're probably going to have something on both of them. He obeys the gods. I need you to write these things down now. He obeys the gods. That's definitely morally good. He follows their instructions. I know I'm writing kind of small, but I'm going to say everything I'm writing, okay? Follows their instructions despite personal wants. And examples of this are he left Dido. He keeps pressing toward Italy. You know, he could have just stayed with Andromache and Helenus and the little baby Troy and just had a nice life.
Imagine it all gets destroyed. There's a war and it's all burnt, and then we're just traveling. We found these people who just started listening to the and there's all the little things. There's McDonald's over here.
Yes. Okay, let's look at the leaving Dido in another way. He made Dido think they were married. He let Dido think.
How's that bad?
I just don't think I'm even going to answer that question. And then he left her devastated. And do you remember how he was going to do it? He's going to sneak away. That's just low. He was going to sneak away secretly. That's just bad. Yes.
Maybe he just doesn't want conflict.
Then he's not mentally strong. Therefore, he's not good.
But here's my
But then it
point.
is
All three of those reasons.
Okay.
My problem is that every single one of us in here already said that you should elect.
Okay, I know. Okay, here's the deal. Hey, we're going to have to, because it's 9:57, just to tell you. And I've got 3 more. I'm not doing all 5 common topics, but I've got 3 more. Well, we argued that last week. But here's the thing. When you are doing this exercise, it's called invention. We're finding ideas. We don't dismiss the ideas. We just write them down. Do you see what I mean? Even if we've entertained them previously and we didn't like them, write them down, get them out of your brain and onto the paper, because then you can use them. Because if you are anything like me, you will forget some of these. Oh, that was a great idea. What was that idea? I don't have that idea anymore. It's gone. And even if you don't know if it's going to come in useful, this is the place where we find, Aristotle would say, all the available means of persuasion as far as ideas go. All the things we can use. Okay, does that make sense? You could, for time's sake, I'm just going to say, you could, before you're ready to make your outline, you could explore more examples of Aeneas being good in these ways. He's certainly strong. He withstands shipwreck and storms, and for heaven's sakes, the burning of his city.
Burning his ships.
Yes, and the burning of his ships. But yet, occasionally, sometimes he just wants to give up. Wants to give up. For example, he was willing to stay in Carthage. I'm just giving up the whole thing. I'm not showing any mental or physical fortitude right now at all. I just want to give up. Yes, Matthew.
So therefore, he's a good leader compared to all those other people.
And see, you're doing it again. You're saying things that just, because the next topic is comparison. Thank you. We compare our subject to others. Here are some people I'd like to compare with. Okay, yeah, Owen, lay it on me.
There's something that happened in the beginning of the story where he existed on TV, like dad and like something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But then because he wanted to stay.
Oh, and that's mentally, and that's strength. Is that where you're going? I like it. He doesn't abandon his family in Troy. His wife is unfortunately killed, but that is not his fault. All right, while you jot that down, oh yes. Okay.
So when
Ouch, just hurt my toe.
they burnt the ships, Judah came out and started all of them in there. They were like, they burnt the ships.
And he kept a grip and made a good decision rather than just give up? Is that where you were going?
No, I was going like he like as a good leader, he made the decision of like not pushing them, like, come on guys, I think you don't want to do this.
Okay. Made wise decision. Okay, it's good. To leave some in Sicily. Do you see? We're very heavily weighted on one side here. What? Or he abandoned. You see, it's all in how you view it. He abandoned See, the same point can be both sides. He abandoned many in Sicily. Okay, here's the thing. Some of my students say this is a little like lying. Sometimes it feels that way. But you can spin the information, and depending on how you look at it, it can persuade you one way or another. And the reason I'm not teaching you to lie or that everything, can be twisted. But I want you to be aware that it can be done because it's being done to you. Everybody who wants you to buy something is giving you some information and they are suppressing other information. If I say he abandoned many in Sicily and I suppress the fact that they wanted to stay, and I suppress the fact that he gave them a choice, I am indeed suppressing important information to make my point. And so is every commercial that you've ever seen. They will not show you, beer commercials aren't going to show you cirrhosis of the liver or drunk driving accidents or, Nintendo isn't even a thing anymore, is it? I don't know. Oh, okay. I don't even know. PS whatever number. They're not going to tell you the vast amount of financial problems that this can cause. And also the fact that your brain's going to shrivel up into a prune because you're going to be an idiot because you stare at a screen all day. They're going to suppress that information. So it's okay to suppress. All right, I'm sorry. I hate this. We need an extra 20 minutes, but we're going to go. Comparison. Compare Aeneas to, guys, Latinus. What kind of leader was Latinus when war broke out? What did Latinus do? Do you remember? Everybody wanted to go to war? And what was king? That's Achilles. There's an epic poem, and it is a different one. It's an awesome one. Latinus is Lavinia's dad. I need to give my daughter to a foreigner. The Aeneid tells us he just went in his room and closed the door. He just gave up. Okay, whatever. Apparently you're going to have war. Your retelling says he refused to open the gates of war, the gates of the Temple of Janus. And so Juno came and she pushed him open, she just flipped him open. I can picture, it doesn't take much for Juno, Latinus gave up on his people. Does Aeneas ever give up?
No, he wants to.
Okay, I'm going to write up here. Never gives up his quest. He never gives it up permanently. All right, he may have pit stops. But he never looks at his people and says, I am so done, you're just going to have to do whatever you want. He doesn't do it in Sicily, even. All right, fine, burn them all. I am so done with all of you. I tried, and this is the thanks I get. He does not react that way, right? How about Aeneas versus Mezentius? A king so rotten his own people threw him out. How does Aeneas treat his followers? Is he so mean to him they would want to throw him out? No.
He takes into consideration how when he let some of the people stay because they get dedicated. You could say from the Noah standpoint, he only wanted dedicated people and people that were tired, he just kicked them out. But he gave them the choice.
Yes.
He didn't nope, you guys signed up, this is it, you guys signed up.
Okay, so I'm going to say treats his people well. And we're going to say gave choice in Sicily. I know I'm just writing all over here. Also, do you remember one of the first things he did at the beginning of the poem after they're shipwrecked on the coast of Africa? He goes out to see if there's any sign of the other ships, but he does something while he's out and brings something back. It's a little point, and you might not remember. He goes hunting, and he shoots deer, and he brings back food for everyone. He's their leader. He brings back food. He finds food for shipwrecked friends. So do you see how comparison works? I'm looking, what kind of leader was Latinus? How is Aeneas like that or not like that? What kind of leader is Mezentius? How is Aeneas not like or not like that? Yes, Rhett.
Like, and this didn't like really happen, but like they didn't really talk about this at all. It might have happened, but like you kind of get the sense that he would like set apart his own wants and needs for others.
Yes, you do.
Like with the deer, like if you would have found a deer and there was only enough for all of them to eat, and there was one person who wasn't going to be able to eat. Yeah.
Yeah, despite personal wants. This was for following the gods, but he does other things in spite of that. I want you to write this down on the top of your paper. Do this at home. Think of what Turnus is like and how Aeneas is like or unlike that. If it's like Turnus, I guess that would be a no. And if it's not, it would be yes. Evander, we don't meet him much, but just think about his little peaceful community up the Tiber and what he does and how he's willing to give his son to Aeneas. So just ask yourselves that question and add more. Okay, we're going to move on. Relationship. Relationship is the topic that asks us, what are the results of his leadership? What did his leadership lead to? Obviously, Rome being built. Rome was built because he led them. What else happened because of his leadership? Can you think of another something else that happened? Do Trojans die in this battle? In this war? In the war with Turnus and Latinus? No, Trojans in the battle for Italy. At the end of the book, in that war. Are there Trojan soldiers who die? So does that mean that his men willingly die for him under his leadership? His men willingly die in battle. I don't know why that Lee is there. For him. Gee, you know, I hate to do this, but I'm going to do it. On the flip side, the death count. He loses many soldiers.
When George Washington went.
I know, but we're spinning. We're spinning. Dido dies. Turnus dies. Amata, the queen, dies. Death, death, death. These are the results. You know, see, you could refute that by saying those are not the results of his leadership. Those are extenuating circumstances. How about, let's go back to the Sicily thing. He abandoned many in Sicily. We could spin that to say many refused to follow. See, that's another little nuance from Sicily. I am not following you anymore. I'm staying here. Hit the road. Does that make sense? Do you see how it's all about what direction I'm looking at it from? And when I ask myself these questions, then I kind of look at it this side, that side. Okay, there's one more that we're going to talk about. And this is the one called testimony. It means, what do other people have to say about it? All right, so what would, if we interviewed, we're now interviewing the characters, what does Dido have to say about Aeneas? Watch your language as you reply, because she probably wouldn't, right? He's a horrible guy. He's a rotter. Yes, so Dido hates him. Augustus reveres him. How do we know that Augustus reveres him? Because he had a whole poem made about him. Had a whole poem made. I'm sorry, I'm writing so sloppily, but I'm pretty sure you can't read it from where you are anyway, so I'm reading it all out loud. the worst excuse ever. Oh my goodness. What does Evander say about him? What does Evander think of Aeneas? Evander respects him. How does Turnus feel about him? Turnus thinks he's a dirty, rotten Paris. I'm going to write that. Dirty, rotten Paris. Stealing women throughout the Mediterranean. Because that's what they do. Now, do you see something? I have to let you guys go, but do you see something? If I were arguing back against this, okay, this is the last thing we're going to do today, and then you get 2 weeks off. If I said, if my opponent said, well, according to the testimony of Turnus, Aeneas is a dirty, rotten Paris scoundrel, what's your answer? What's a possible answer? What can you attack? Turnus is a dirty, rotten scoundrel. Yes, just attack Turnus. If you don't like the testimony, attack the person giving the testimony. I feel like I'm teaching you terrible things. All right. Okay, so here's your job. Think of those things. Compare Aeneas to these guys. Think about what makes a good leader, that definition. Think about what the results of his leadership were. Think about what anyone else had to say about him, and then make an outline. Remember, you need 3 big reasons for the side you choose, and then each of those needs at least 3 smaller reasons. So don't pick a very minute, don't pick, he picked up the household gods in Troy. That's way too small for one of your main reasons. It could be a supporting reason, okay, that he was morally good. All right, wonderful. Have a good break. I will see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye. Yes, paper coming to me